You're listening to the Carry On Friends podcast, episode 53. Welcome to the Carry On Friends podcast, where you'll be inspired and empowered to do amazing things in your personal lives, career, business, and community. With your host, Carrie Ann Reed Brown. So the other day, a friend of mine told me about coloring pins, and I'm like, what is that? They introduced me to this brand and the founder, Essence, and coloring pins is celebrating the various shades of black and brown that we represent. And I didn't realize that this was a huge trend. So I got the Melatonin Beauty, which shows a grid of or different hues. And there are also ones for celebrating natural hair. I think this is a great way to celebrate being unapologetically black, brown, or celebrating your natural hair. And I love this. I'm already wearing it on my clothes. So now that I've seen this, I now know that pins are a trend. Check out coloringpins.com. The founder is Essence, and I'm thanking her for getting me hip to this trend and something that I could celebrate, being a beautiful shade of brown. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Carry On Friends podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Ann, and this is episode 53. Before we get into today's interview, we just wanted to go over a couple announcements. At the beginning of the year, I spoke about the podcast and the blog following a theme format. And the theme for January was, fresh starts, new beginnings. We talked about having a bust out year and how to have a bust out year. And so a lot of that content is on the blog. Being that it's almost February, the theme for February, in addition to it being history, is about relationships, not only romantic relationships, but relationships with friends, families, colleagues, business partners, and from a career perspective. So we're looking at relationships from all the different perspectives that we have relationships in our day-to-day lives. And so all the content for the month of February will be around those themes. So we welcome your feedback. You could check it out. You could tweet using hashtag COF podcast, speaking of tweeting, or social media handle on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is at Carry On Friends. I would love to continue the conversation online. So today's guest is Melissa Noel. She's a journalist. And the conversation with Melissa happened weeks ago before recent events. And so we touched on a few things in terms of being an immigrant and telling, authentic stories. So this episode is really timely, which is why I'd definitely love to hear from you using the hashtag COF podcast. So I won't keep you waiting any longer. Here's my interview with Melissa. Hello, Melissa. Welcome to the Carry On Friends podcast. I am so excited to have you on the show. A big time broadcaster on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be a part of the Carry On Friends podcast, and I just can't wait to get to chatting already.
All right. Me can't wait to. So before we get into our topic and the discussion, tell the audience, who is Melissa Noel?
Well, I am a multi-platform journalist, and what that means is I report across all platforms. Today I could be in front of the camera, tomorrow behind, or I'm writing a magazine piece. And with that, I particularly use my role. I report for NBCnews.com, Caribbean Beat Magazine, Ebony Magazine, and some television outlets in the Caribbean region. And I use my role as a journalist to really focus on Caribbean stories and Caribbean American stories, because I feel that it is extremely imperative that stories of Caribbean people are part of that conversation, because after all, we have more than 3 million Caribbean people in the U.S. And I just felt like it was my duty to make sure that those stories were told. And I am a first generation Guyanese American, and very proud to be one of the people that is trying to help get these stories more so to the forefront.
I mean, I'm like, you are talking, I'm like, yes, or stories to tell. I just love it. I'm so excited, and I'm so grateful that you are doing this because, for a tiny region, we've made a lot of contributions in the U.S. and globally.
Globally,
so
yes.
it's it's really great that you have these avenues to tell our stories. And I am so, so excited that you are on the show. So the first thing, why is it important for us to tell, or for you to be able to tell these authentic stories, or Caribbean American cultural stories? Why is it important for our stories to be told?
It is, I cannot even begin to tell you how many times I've walked into meetings and the only representation I've seen in newsrooms, or I've seen as far as stories go, be about, a natural disaster in the region, or just be about something else that was negative. However, when a story is presented that's of upliftment or entrepreneurship or culture, what business, anything like that, it's I don't know if our viewers or our readers will really take to that. And my response to that would always be, well, why not? These are, people love to see themselves reflected in what they view, what they read. And when you have so many people from the region who do so much, we already mentioned that you do it in the US, but we've made impacts globally. For me, it was just like, well, why not? Why wouldn't people be interested? How will you know unless you show them, unless you share these stories? And I feel like if we don't share these stories, who else will? You have to get people excited about the contributions that Caribbean people have made. You have to get people to understand not only the contributions, but the connections that we have globally and why they're so important. And then also, if you don't know your history, how are you going to know where you're going? And then if you don't celebrate the culture that you have, if you don't celebrate the rise that you're making as a people and the things that you're doing, then it gets lost. And I really felt like it was very important to always make sure that those stories are not missing from the conversation. My parents made sure that I knew my stories growing up. My grandparents made sure that I knew these stories growing up. And I said, for me, it felt like it was just a natural thing that what I would do is make sure that other people know the stories that I get so excited about, and always wonder, well, why don't more people know about this? Mm-hmm. And I felt like for me, I'm like, hey, I'm a journalist. I need to be, bringing these things up in the newsroom and also taking people to task when I say, well, we're reporting on this country when there's a hurricane or an earthquake, but why aren't we reporting on this country or this region when there's something amazing happening? Where's the disconnect here? And I went from just asking, in a meeting or two, to saying, no, I'm going to continue to just pitch stories about this region or about these communities in the US until you listen. That was my thing.
Boy, man, tell you, Melissa, that is so awesome. You said so many things, like Malika notebook is just like scribbling, but you brought up some really great points, right? A few months ago, I had Candace on here, and, there's a running theme of cultural survival. To others, it may seem like Caribbean culture is everywhere, but for us, it doesn't seem like it's ours anymore. It always seems like someone else is, misappropriating it. And then it just seems like, oh, where it came from is an afterthought. Oh, whatever. The other thing that you talked about is, there's a tradition, oral storytelling, right? But we don't have that anymore. So you have to find new and creative ways to tell our stories, because the newer generation needs to see, like what you said, what's possible, what we've done, the Sidney Poitiers, the Harry Belafonte, all of those people come all the way down, the Cicely Tysons, the Shirley Chisholms, all the way down. Bob is there. Bob, you can't eclipse Bob, but you also need to know that there are all these other people that you're like, someone said Shirley Chisholm. I'm like, yes, there's her. Yes, a lot of icons and figures that are important to Black history here is they have Caribbean roots, and that's important and telling, because the Caribbean has just been, has always been like a bunch of revolutionaries down there. And so there, when you come here, your parent, the whole thing of working hard and making a change and being very socially conscious is just something that I think we were just born with: ambition, hard work, and just being socially conscious.
And perseverance, definitely. And it's
Yes.
one of the things that I think really drives what I try to do in my role as a reporter. It's like, for me, these stories are so important. My time, back and forth in Guyana was important, and then traveling the Caribbean and seeing all these stories and just knowing the own communities that I'm able to report on here so far, because I hope to do much, much more. It's like, it's seeing these things and saying, like, I can't be the only person that it gets to experience this, or, just it or not, or it just be something that I talk about amongst, a group of people who may know too. You need other people to know and understand that are not part of Caribbean culture or of Caribbean, don't have Caribbean roots, to understand the importance as well. Because I don't think it's just about us knowing. We know already. Like, we need other people to know as well and understand why it's so important to not just see the same old, or to not just or not just highlight one certain aspect. It's to see the whole spectrum of it and to know that this is important. And I have to give a shout out to my editor at NBCBlock.com, Amber Payne, because she has allowed me to do and cover and really get out some stories in the last year and a half on a platform like NBCNews.com that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do anywhere else. She has been amazingly supportive and really, really understanding of the fact that people want, like one, that for that site, you can't just take a definition and think that, only this group of people these stories will apply to. She has really given me the opportunity to take these stories and really just take it and run with it. She's like, I know you do this well. Let's get more stories like this out there. And I'm really grateful to her, because I really feel like that's part of for me is where it starts, having people that understand in those decision-making roles why this is so important, and why, telling stories out of Cuba and Curacao, as well as Jamaica and the U.S. Virgin Islands, Barbados, telling those stories are so important. And then also, not just in the region, but when there are major things happening, like whether it's Caribbean American Heritage Month, or whether we just have, or knowing the importance of when the hurricane happened in Haiti just a few months ago, to go into the Haitian American communities and to really go beyond just, and see what they're doing, and not just make it, this happened here and we're moving on to the next story. It's
Right.
much more important than that. And then to keep reporting on that and not just jump in, get your story done, jump out. That's not something I ever wanted to do. It needs to be consistent. It has to be constant.
Right. You touched on something that, initially wasn't on my agenda, but I want to talk about that. So let's talk about how you got to be a multi-platform journalist. Did you start out this way? Were you working with one agency or one news outlet, or how did you get to this point? Because you said you're talking about your editor, and that's something that I want to get back to. But tell me a little bit more how you got to being a multi-platform journalist. I heard parts of the story sometime last year when your parents freaked out because you decided to make the move and
Yeah, so I started my career at ABC News in New York right out of undergrad. I attended Howard University. That's where I did my undergraduate studies in journalism. And even there, like, I hosted the Island Hopping radio show. I was writing Caribbean stories for the student newspaper, The Hilltop. I was writing for WHUR, covering news out of the Caribbean region as well as West Africa. So it's always been a part of me. Fast forward, started my career at ABC News and went to graduate school. And during that time, I was hired in a full-time role. And I said to myself, okay, I took the role on. I was producing, reporting. And And I said, okay, well, I think I've made it. Work your way up, you do what you have to do. And I loved what I was doing, but I still felt like there was something missing. And I realized that what was missing for me was being able to tell stories about the Caribbean and about Caribbean people, period. Like it just was missing. And I felt so strongly about it that I left my full-time role that I had, and I decided to become a freelancer. Of course.
What? Lord Jesus. You have to tell me what mommy and daddy and grandma, auntie and cousin and
Um,
the neighbor down the road, because everybody
Everybody.
had something to say.
Exactly. Melissa, you matter what? That was literally it. That was it. It was like you're gone up here. You're trying. You need to be the next Diane Sawyer. What is going on? And I expected it. I totally expected it. I had to deal with that for a long time because, of course, you leave your full-time job, you're leaving that full-time pay, you're leaving those benefits, you're leaving all those things. But I saw the bigger picture, even though my parents and Auntie Pam and, everybody didn't see it. I saw the bigger picture. And what I did instead, becoming a freelancer gave me the time and the freedom to really build, to really be able to be in the region a lot more because I felt that that was important to really be reporting on the ground in the Caribbean, and then to also be more effective in terms of my reporting in Caribbean communities in New York City and Washington, D.C. and in other places. I thought like I needed the time to really have people see like I care about being here. I'm not just here to quickly cover this one story and then I guess you'll see me in 5 or 6 months. So it was hard. I'm not gonna lie and say like, it just kind of picked up and it was easy or, things just fell into place. It took a good almost 2 years before people started to really, I would say editors. I started doing a lot of work for voicesofnewyork.org and truly covering their Caribbean news section in the city of New York, which has been an amazing and tremendous experience. And I'm really grateful to the editors there that really just let me do my thing, essentially.
Right.
And then from there, I started doing a lot more in the Caribbean. I started doing business news in the Caribbean, sustainable tourism in the Caribbean, entrepreneurship. And then I started also just covering major environmental issues. Like whatever it was, I was like, okay, I'm your girl. Like I am your Caribbean reporter. Like this is what I want to do because I started to see how much people not only appreciated it, but how much they realized it was important. Like, well, oh my gosh, like, why weren't these stories being told before? Or I've never seen, news about the region in a major U.S. medium.
Right.
And that's where I was like, yes, like I'm doing this right. So 2 years in, I started to see the results, and I would get frustrated and I would say, why aren't people paying attention to this? Why aren't they paying attention to this? But I just stuck with it. And I'm really, really glad I stuck with it. I through that time, I, was freelancing at NBC. I've worked in every role, producer, reporter, shooter, editor, whatever it is, I did it just to make sure that, you got to keep the money coming in while,
And not only that, you kind of your range, so you're not in, one role. You are able to
Exactly.
do multiple tasks. So did you finish your because you said you were doing a MBA. Did you finish that?
Well, I was doing a master's in journalism
Masters.
and international relations. So yes, I did finish that. If you
Okay.
started, I'm a full believer. I started, let me finish.
Okay.
So I finished it, and when I got that master's in journalism, international relations, I said, okay, what am I gonna do now? How am I gonna make this a reality? So I was producing and writing at NBC, several shows, all those things. But in the back of my mind, I knew that focusing on Caribbean communities and other minority communities, but specifically Caribbean communities, was what I wanted to do. But just figuring out how to make that happen. So I kept, my day job, quote unquote, as you would call it, as a producer. And then it would, like, let's say I worked 10 to 6 or 10 to 8 or something. And right after that, if there was an event happening that had to do with anything in the Caribbean communities of New York City, I was there. If I had to jump on a plane and head to Trinidad and cover something for 3 days and not get paid for those 3 days, I did it. I was just like, let me go, let me get this done because it's gonna pay off, and it has. And I ended up meeting my editor that way at NBC when they started the new vertical, NBCBLK.com. And I just, from off the bat, I said, look, I want to, like, of course, I can cover anything that you need me to cover because I cover, everyday national news, local news, all those good things. I can do all of that. But I really want to focus on telling stories of Caribbean Americans and telling stories out of the region. Will you allow me to do that? And she said, a good story is a good story. You send it to me and let's make this work. And we've been doing that for the past, I would say, year and a half now.
That is so amazing because, the lesson in what you said was, trust your vision for your career and for yourself because, as Caribbean parents, they see one thing for you and you see another thing for them. But, their power, even though when you're an adult, their power seems so strong.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Their power is always strong. It's like, it's just little me. But you trusted the vision you had for yourself, that vision and that passion for, Caribbean stories since college. And you decided to, you're going to stick to this because this is what you believe. And it takes time. That's just like the underlying theme. Like, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take time.
Well, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you want it or you decide that you want to do it, then everything kind of comes to kind of make it challenging to really test if you really want this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Most
so
definitely. And that was one of the biggest things I kept saying to myself. When I knew that this was what I was meant to do and focus on, was that no matter where I went in the industry, this was always in the back of my mind, or I always came back to it. I would say, okay, I'm gonna move to, I don't know, Texas and take this local news reporting job. And then as I said to myself I would do it, then this opportunity would come up to do something in the Caribbean, or I would say, or it wouldn't work out. And I would still come back to doing this. And that's how I knew. I said, okay, whatever it is, I have to stick with this because this is necessary. Yeah. Like, this is where I need to be. So I just kept pushing and pushing. And it just, now it has gotten to a point where I get so many requests for stories and people writing to me and things that they would like to have covered, but I don't have the capacity as just one person right now to do it all. I'm hoping to get to a point where this is what I'm able to focus on full time. I'm not quite there yet, still trying to figure that out, but I'm confident that people realize the importance. We had some major stories in 2016 that showed, why you need people who are knowledgeable about the Caribbean region, what's happening there, whether it comes to climate change, whether it's reporting accurately on issues that happen in countries that are hit by natural disasters, as we saw with Haiti, and missteps made when people were reporting on that beautiful island. Or when it came to Fidel Castro and his death and Cuba and U.S. relations, you need people who are knowledgeable about the region and not just, as we say, parachuting in to tell a story and then just going home. It's a lot more than that. And I feel like I've been able to show why that expertise and knowledge is so important. And then just not only that, but because you have so many people here from the region contributing on a daily basis on national platforms, it's to me, it only makes sense that you tell these stories. And now, of course, my parents, who thought I was mad, they're like, oh gosh, you see what Melissa doing? Oh God, what is she doing?
Always. Always. But that's good because we are very aware of their struggle and their sacrifices to be here. Yes. And so, when they're happy, we really want to make them happy. But, for us, the struggle is we want to make them happy, but we also want to be happy too. So it's the icing on the cake is when you're happy and then they're happy.
Yeah, it feels really good. Like I saw my mother cry and we went for Guyana's 50th anniversary of independence. We all went home as a family, but of course I could not miss that opportunity to report for NBC. So here I am doing stories, and to see her cry because she's proud made me proud. And she said, "Oh gosh, like she's we are on NBC," meaning like, all of us.
Right.
And she could never imagine a story about Guyana's independence, like really being like it was front of the website piece that day about it. So she was proud, and that made me happy. I say, you see?
That's awesome. So, all right, I have a couple other questions in
Hmm.
terms of oh gosh, I don't know which part to go with it. All right, so let's talk about in this. I rarely go very political on the show, but I would be remiss to point out that we kind of feel it feels like we live in a climate that everything is not so friendly towards immigrants.
Hmm.
And so why how do we go about still telling our stories authentically and proudly in a climate that just feels like it's like not friendly to immigrants? And it's very hard to see a person walking down the street from the Caribbean and say, oh, they're an immigrant because we look like any other black person. But for most of us, it's the accent and all these other things. So what do you have to say in terms of the pride and being, what would it mean to be unapologetically Caribbean American going into this new administration and just period, new administration or not?
Well, I would first say that I know that there's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people. While there are people who feel like, yes, the best has arrived, there's so much uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes fear. And I totally can empathize with people and not being sure what to expect with this new administration. But I feel as though, and the climate that essentially we've been seeing, but I think that is, and I definitely think we have more work to do. But I think that because of those things, it's even more important now than ever that the stories of communities like Caribbean communities and others that are wholly underreported, that those stories are told, because these are the communities that are going to be affected most, in my opinion, by changes that are to come. So for us not to share these stories or to not get these stories out there, I feel like would be a detriment to the communities that need it the most, that need their stories told the most, and that need to know about what's going to be happening as far as change. I feel that more than ever, it's important to be that unapologetic Caribbean person, or that unapologetic Latino person, or that unapologetic whatever it is, because of to show that all of these different, wonderful, beautiful people make up the fabric of the United States of America. There's no prototype for an American. There's no prototype for what a person from the Caribbean should look, sound, be like. And I think that it's more important now than ever that we take pride in those differences, or we take pride. Those differences shouldn't separate us, I should say.
Right.
Those differences, to me, show what the beauty of America is and why so many of us came here. Our parents came here. I know that's why my parents came here. Because you could be whatever it is you want to be, and you can make all these different, dreams and goals you have for yourself. And there was no prototype to success, and there was no prototype to what an American is. And I think that we would do ourselves a disservice, and I would do a disservice to Caribbean people and many others by not telling these stories. I think now it's going to be even more important that people know they can turn to certain reporters or certain outlets to get stories out, to be able to view certain stories, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on voting policies, whether it's on schools, education, those kinds of things. People really have to be made aware of certain things because of the fact that we're going into territory that is unknown. So while people may be uncertain, and some even fearful, I would say it was more important now than ever to celebrate who you are, because there are, unfortunately, a lot of things happening now that are kind of pulling you in like a tug of war against that. but to stand firm in who you are and the beauty of that. I think that these cultural differences or what makes certain cultures unique is beautiful. And any chance we get to celebrate that, whether it's looking at a story or talking to people in a particular group, we have to do that now more than ever.
Awesome. I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think, and you know what? I'll be honest. It's easy for me to say because I live in New York City, and it's just like,
Great.
it's a cultural melting, not even a melting
Yeah.
pot. It's just a salad bowl, of a variety of cultures. And there are other people who live in cities that aren't as diverse and have a large immigrant population that's loud and proud the way New York
Exactly.
kind of does it. So
Agreed.
so I am aware of that. I have family who lives in Wisconsin, and I lived in Wisconsin, so I understand it's very different. But your culture and heritage, they're uniquely you, and they bring something. And I'm hoping that we get more opportunities to have conversation with people who may not know enough about our culture, and we can say, well, this is how my culture helps me and benefits me, because everyone does things differently. Everyone's proud, whether they're Italian American, Irish American, everyone does something different and bring it to the table. And we just have to understand that there are some people who they have their own views, and that's because of irresponsible reporting. That's like what you've been saying. You have a responsibility to report. So this brings me to my other question. You are on a variety of stations and outlet, and people are like, well, she has that opportunity, so there's a double-edged sword here. There are people who are relying on like news outlet to report their stories, but should we only rely on news outlet to report our stories? Are there other ways we can begin telling our stories in a positive way other than the beach is pretty and there's a hurricane or a earthquake or some flood?
I definitely don't think that you should rely mainly, I guess I would say, on mainstream news outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, mainstream news outlets, there's certain, the way that, you have to cover certain things because, this is of national importance, or this is of concern, or this is what we think that viewers want to see. And while it works on a general, maybe generally, it doesn't always work for the other stories. There's always going to be stories missing because, of course, you cannot fit everything in. And sometimes things are going to be missing from it. So I think that it's very important to look beyond mainstream news outlets. I think you should definitely include those, but I think it's important. You have really, really great voices in different communities when it comes to blogs, and when it comes to even like a podcast like this one. Like, these are avenues. I'm really big on radio. I'm really big on really finding voices in the community that have something real to say, because this is where you can get and learn about, go more in depth on topics that, your nightly news broadcast doesn't have the capacity to do. And it's so important because you get to engage more. Like, you may not be able to engage with that newscaster that's reading 6:30 PM headlines, or you may not be the person that watches that. But if you're engaging on social media or on websites in a way with outlets that are giving you a further look into certain issues or certain topics, I think that is extremely important. You can't just get your news from one source, but then on top of that, you have to be responsible with the places that you get your news from. Is you cannot just take everything as gospel. You have to make sure things are credible, whether it's a blog or whether it's, it comes from, a reputable news outlet. You have to gauge and you have to vet those things as well to ensure that you aren't taking in information that may be false or taking in information that's misconstrued. But I think it's important to get news from a variety of places. A lot of times people ask me, how did you even find out about this story? Or where did you get these story ideas from? And to be honest, is because I really look to what I'm seeing in the different communities. I use Instagram like in a way that people are like, you found this person on Instagram? Yeah, like I'll follow pages. I see what people have going on. I look at what's happening in the communities. And I just show up. I'm like, okay, well, let me go to this, meet these people, engage with them, learn more about something that's happening. And I've literally gotten, I mean, story ideas that people are like, no way. And it's because I'm like engaging on platforms and really trying to see what else, what else am I missing, or what don't I know about that someone on this platform can tell me about. And I think that that is going to be even more important now as people say, they want to organize around a certain idea or topic. We're going to see a lot more of that. But I feel like it's how you use it, like using it responsibly. But I definitely feel that there's so many, especially when it comes to like Caribbean culture. I think that blogs are the places that really get it first. Culture or business, those kinds of things. A lot of the blogs, like really, they focus on specific things and they really get to the heart of building community around that. And I have to say, I really appreciate that. And I kind of want to continue building and knowing people in the communities and who do different things in a media space. And even like some of the movies and things that educate people as to what it means. I think those are really, really important.
Awesome. So, as we wrap up, tell us something you want the audience to know as it pertains to what it means for you to be, unapologetically Caribbean American, and what you've learned. What has your travels to the region and the stories you've covered help you to see about the culture? Because you have like a broader view. You're in the community, but you have this opportunity to travel and see so much more on a broader scale than most of us do, because we're just in New York City and we go to our local islands. But you've traveled to a lot of countries. You're also in New York. So what is one thing those travels have taught you about the Caribbean, its people, the region, and the diaspora that it's important that we should know?
I would say that my travels throughout the Caribbean region have really instilled in me the sense that even more so than before I've had the opportunity to really see so many places in the region, that the diversity of the region and not only what it has to offer, but the diversity of what is there is the reason why these stories need to be told. It's one of the main reasons to me. And I say that because a lot of times, of course, I know, one country is known for this, another place might have this going on. And those were things I was like, all right, yeah, so I know this, I know that. But when you actually get to go there and spend a considerable amount of time there and engage with people and learn about what is happening there, then you see that the diversity of the Caribbean was even more than I could have ever imagined for myself. You think something might be a particular way, but once you get to experience it, then I got to see, wow, this diversity and these differences and yes, we're all one region. And I definitely believe in the model of like one Caribbean, but to see the diversity of what we have and the beauty of that, and the fact that there are so many people who have no idea of this diversity and maybe have an idea that, oh, it's all pretty much the same, isn't it? And I say, no, like there is so much there. Getting to experience that firsthand, and the thousands of stories, maybe even more than that I could think of that can come from that, is why I said to myself, wow, like this has to be what I focus on no matter what, no matter where my career takes me or what I have to do. This week I have to do something else. I always have to put a focus on this region because of the fact that there's just so much to be explored, so much to be reported on, and so much I feel that it's important that other people know. And then also for our own communities, like there's so many times that you do stories and you have people from the place or from the country or the region that say, wow, I never knew that. I had no idea until I read your story, or I didn't know this country, had this, or this was happening there. And I think that is really, really speaks to the importance of these stories being told on a regular basis, not just here and there, and definitely not just sea, sun, and sand. Yes, that is that's one of the beautiful things about the region, but it's not the only thing about the region. And it's been one of my goals to show people that the Caribbean has so much more to offer, and there's so many other things that the stories that can come from the region. So pay attention to that diversity. Yeah. I think is what I've gotten from that.
Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, this has been one of I love all my episodes and all my guests, but for me, shows and guests where we talk about culture is important. And one of the things that Melissa said that I really want to reinforce are individual stories and perspectives. They matter. So Carry On Friends is the community that I built that focus on entrepreneurship and career. But you also, if you are interested in, Caribbean motorbikers or whatever niche topic within your community, those stories, they have a voice. They need to be heard. And you can create those and not solely rely on existing outlets to tell those stories. And that's the power of the age we live in, the internet. You have blogs and podcasts that can do that. So it's really important. And you know what, like Melissa said, you have to believe in the vision. I mean, Carry On Friends started almost 4 years ago, and it wasn't easy, but once you keep to it and you have focus and you have people who believe in it, the traction will come. And so for her, she believed in the vision. So I really, really want to encourage you to tell your own stories, create your own communities, and connect with other communities, and so that the beauty and the tapestry of our lives will show. And it's, when you do this collectively, more people will be interested because they're like, really? Yeah. I didn't know. It's always like, really? So, and we take for granted the things we know other people know, and we should not take that for granted. So it's really important to tell the story. So Melissa, thank you for being on the show. Please continue the conversation online. Use hashtag COF podcast. We would love to just continue the dialogue online on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, because there's always much that we could talk about. One day, I'll figure out how I'll do a call in and do a studio. I'm not there yet, but it's really important to continue these conversations. Melissa, I am so excited. And Melissa don't always do serious shows, because she did one the other day with Major Hype, and so that's all. That's so funny. So it's not always serious. It's fun and games because, as you know, Caribbean people, we are a jovial bunch, and we have our fair share of good time, right?
So I get to do things like report from carnivals and do food festivals, and I enjoy that stuff to the max. And I definitely make it a point to present those parts of our culture in an authentic manner, because of course, one of my goals is to make sure that it's done authentically, and it isn't just, or the locals call it this, and we tried this really weird. No, like that's something that has always gotten to me. So I make sure that when I do those stories that you see like the beauty of it, but also that it's authentic, and it's not just somebody saying, oh my gosh, I happened upon this weird, food and stuff on this island. No, that stuff drives me insane. So I get to do those things. I enjoy it, but then I also want to make sure that there's attention brought to issues and business and the arts and all the things that, all the different topics that you see regularly. We have those stories too. And no matter what it is, there's definitely an audience from that. As I always say, a good story is a good story. And once it's good, people are going to want to read it, know more about it. And like you said, it'll gain traction if you stick with it. You have to stick with it. That's the thing. It's easy to want to give up because it gets hard. It's like, oh gosh, I'm not able to make money off of this right away, or it's not, people, you're trying to build a following and you feel like people aren't paying attention, but it takes time. And then also it's about connections. You have to connect with people. I've been able to connect with you via Instagram. Hello.
Hey.
I've been able to connect with other really great women and business people from the region just by, following their work and showing up to events and meeting people in person and really just showing like you're a part of this community, whatever community it may be. Like, show your interest, show and support people. I think that's really important. You have to support other people as well. And I know I've seen it happen in turn. When you're doing something, they support you too.
Yeah, that's true. That's a whole other episode that has to come down again. The power of, we did it last year, making connections, and we got to drive home the connections, because that's what is going to help you making these powerful connections. So I'm so excited. And Melissa, I am so looking forward to what else you have going on, because you already declare it bust out year. So me want to see how you're going bust out.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I'm ready to bust out. Long time. This is the beginning, the official beginning of my bust out year.
Yes. So tell the audience how they could connect with you on social media.
Oh, sure. You can reach out to me on my website, www.melissanoelreports.com. That's MELISSA. Noel reports.com, as well as on Twitter at Noel Knows Well, or on Instagram, Live from Melissa. I am everywhere.
All right, cool. And I'll make sure I put those in the show notes. And again, follow the conversation, COF, hashtag COF podcast, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And until next time, family, walk good. Okay, friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Carry On Friends podcast. For a recap of this episode and other great articles, please visit the blog at www.carryonfriends.com. That's CARRYONFRIENDS.com. The Carry On Friends podcast is produced by Breadfruit Media, and new episodes are available every other Tuesday morning. You can listen to the podcast on the website, carryonfriends.com, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen to your podcast.